Hi, welcome to Tech Leader TV. I'm your host, John Thomas Flynn, and this month we're celebrating our 11th anniversary of TLTV, and we continue with a stellar lineup of topics and guests, a live streaming video webcast and cable television program focusing on public sector, information technology, and the political landscape. We come to you today courtesy of our sponsors, LexisNexis, Dimension Data, Veeam, Tanium, Gigaman, Advanced Onion, and IP Solutions. And finally, Flynn Classic & Associates, a California certified small business enterprise and trusted advisor for strategic IT business development, marketing, and solution services. And thanks for watching. The Tech Leader TV website continues to set new audience records. We're reaching thousands of state IT decision makers and vendor partners who recorded 250,000, quarter of a million page views last month alone. We recorded 2 million views last year, and our goal is to double that again in 2017, and we're well on our way. And we have a very special program today with our guest, Amy Tong, Director of the California Department of Technology and the State Chief Information Officer. It was exactly 11 years ago this month, in August 2006, we had our first broadcast of Tech Leader TV with our good friend and former state CIO, now prison healthcare receiver, Clark Kelso. 11 years, seems like only yesterday, huh? Anyway, as our longtime viewers of Tech Leader TV know, before I introduce my guest and we begin our conversation, I request your indulgence to allow me to pontificate on pressing issues of the day. There's so much to talk about, and of course, Amy Tong is the perfect person to have a discussion with about the state of IT in the state of California. Issues of interest for our viewers? As I'm told, there are legion. To outline just a few, the many changes in her organization and its role and responsibilities since she took over in June of 2016. The latest news on the implementation of the new Project Approval Lifecycle STAR process, which was rolled out in 2015. Cybersecurity is always of the highest priority. Procurement reform, another of our guests' top issues. The latest on the state's cloud strategy, which has even me a bit confused, although that's not surprising. Next, there's the status of that pesky Fender scorecard, and also the latest on California Department of Technology's project oversight. We'll also talk about new issues for the fiscal year 2018 and 19 that are being prepared even as we speak. And there are rumors, really more than rumors, about a count at 4. So much to talk about in so little time. And as our audience and viewers keep telling me, Flynn, we want to hear from our guests, not you. I don't take it personal. Well, as usual on Tech Leader TV, we're going to continue to do our best to keep the state's spotlight on the state's management of its annual multi-billion-dollar IT investment. Whatever it really is, we want to see government more effective, more efficient, and secure. And hopefully, we'll have a little fun and keep your interest at the same time. Our motto is simple. As I like to say, California can always do better. Let's begin the journey now with our discussion on technology, government, politics, and as I like to say, other unnatural acts. I'll be right back with our guests in just a moment, and we'll begin. Welcome to Tech Leader TV. As I said, our guest today is Amy Tong, the Director of the California Department of Technology and State Chief Information Officer. Amy was appointed by Governor Brown just over a year ago, 14 months ago to be exact. It was the end of June of 2016. She has over 22 years in state government in a host of positions. Formerly, she was CIO, agency CIO at the Office of Systems Integration. She was also CIO at the Lottery, CTO, Technology Officer at the Board of Equalization, and a number of other positions. She's a Hornet, BS and MBA at Sacramento State. Amy, welcome to Tech Leader TV. Glad to have you finally.
Hello, John.
We're really excited about you. Like I said, we've had every CIO since I was CIO has been on here, except for the one whose name we're not allowed to reveal. No. But as I noticed, we talked about your organization and your vision a strategic clarity, a sense of common purpose, the end goal being a department that is pointed in the same direction, continuously working toward one common goal. Lofty sentiments, Ms. Tong. How's it working out for you?
I'm still here and enjoying it. So I think that's a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, it is.
It's been going well. Largely, thanks to my excellent staff, who's really been welcoming me to the role, and give me a lot of pointers and the things they have gone through. And I have great support from the people that I work for. Secretary Maribel Badger at the GovUp agency and the governor's office, and just partners all around the state has been nothing but helpful.
Oh, great.
So very, very fortunate.
Makes it good. Well, let me ask you this question. In your background and career, what led you into public service in the first place?
Yes, my goodness, where do I start? Public service has always been my interest. As you described earlier, I'm a local grad from CSUS, both my bachelor's degree and MBA. And my family have always been in the public service. My parents were both college professors, so just that blood, maybe serving the public, it's runs in the family. Yeah. So as soon as I graduated from college, I had a choice to enter the private sector or the public sector, and I chose the public sector.
Yeah, in Boston, we always refer to it as the dreaded private sector. Long story. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead. So you decided to start. Where did you first start? With the state?
Yes, my first job actually is with the state of California, the Water Resources Control Board, part of Cal EPA.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, that's quite a career, as I noticed. I mean, you really move up the ladder. I guess we'll be talking. But it's a little premature, I guess. But we'll have to start talking about your next, where the next move in the career ladder will go.
Yeah, it's a little premature right now.
Yeah. It's well, you'll certainly have a lot of opportunities to pursue, I'm sure. Let's go back to your organization. There's been a lot of changes in the year, 14 months or so that you've been there, and I noticed I was able to pull out an old organization chart and look at the new one, and it's considerably different. You've had a big turnover in roles and even in the organization itself. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? How your organization is built, some of your senior folks, and I realize that there's been changes in the statewide telecom. There's been a number of changes. So why don't you describe them?
Yeah, I would say that in the past year, I wouldn't necessarily use the word turnover. I think a lot of it is just a natural progression of a staff's career. Some, it is their time to retired, went from a well-earned career, and some has moved to greener path, which we're very, very happy for them. And because of that, and the senior leadership, when I walk into the door, was very open with me of what their plans for, 4 months, 6 months, a year. Some of them are even, decided to stay longer, knowing I need all the help I can get. So I really wanted to thank those staff that extended their, time to retire in order to help out. And because of that, with a lot of input from the senior staff team at the Department of Technology, as well as the community, talked to a lot of the agency information officer, which is my peer prior to joining Department of Technology. Great input on what are the ways to continue to offer efficiency and effectiveness as an organization.
Okay,
so based on those input, we have done realignment in the past year, and that's probably noticing quite a different look of the org chart perspective to streamline our communication from the Department of Technology to these stakeholders to a very much a business line of a offering that we do. And Chris and I, we call ourselves a partner in progress, are working very closely with each other to support the organization. And really each of the office chiefs, ranging from digital innovation to workforce development to security and project, you name it, are really taking ownership of the lines of business that they do.
And you used to have a deputy for admin, deputy for operations, and that's been consolidated under Chris Cruz, right? A former guest of Tech Leader TV, as a matter of fact. And that's going to stay. That's going to stay the way it is, right? That won't be replaced. Now, and I notice how you do break it out, and you did just then about the organization, the digital service, information security, project delivery, innovation, workforce development, et cetera. So let's talk about, and you're relatively new director, I think that's the term, may not be, of OTEC, the Office of Technology Services. What is that? Who's running that now?
Right. So is a chief of Office of Technology Services. That's the title. And Richard Rogers has recently appointed by the governor's office, and that office remains to be one of the offices within the Department of Technology, similar to Scott Gregory. I believe he's a former guest here as well, who is the office chief of digital innovation.
Okay. Now, the other question that's been raised by folks is about telecom. Who's basically the go-to person for telecom in the state right now? You have a statewide. Is it statewide telecom procurement or statewide technology procurement? But there's also who's the leader of telecom for the state of California?
So first thing first, the telecom really it's multiple aspect, and this is really become more clear as the functional realignment took place in the organization. As you mentioned, there is a procurement aspect of telecom.
Sure.
There is a actual management contract of the telecom, and then there's the technical aspect of the telecom. But giving the most of audience here interested, who do I talk to if I want to get on the telecom contract, right? That individual right now, it's Ellen, who is our Deputy Chief Technology Officer, works for Richard Rogers within the Office of Technology Services. So she's the main point of contact. And
is she the one that's by any chance replacing Barbara Garrett, who I think is retiring?
Barbara Garrett has retired, and in fact, that from an organizational efficiency, we didn't backfill that position. We looked around where the subject matter area should be best fit. So the technology, or we call it engineering part of that group, is working for Scott Madonna. And as a network and telecom services, and then contract management portion is reporting to Ellen.
The organization itself, I seem to recall that I think there's 900 FTEs now in the CDT, and what is it, a $328 million budget now.
Sounds about right.
With that kind of an organization, I could have built an empire. I remember I started with 15 and about a $5 million budget when Governor Wilson brought me out from Massachusetts. What are your new initiatives? What's cooking in the chambers of CDT for the next fiscal year? I know everything basically goes into the governor's, is being prepared for the governor's budget for next year. I know you can't be too specific about it, but what are some of the areas that you're looking at changes and putting money into, at least from the standpoint of the CDT?
Right. So if it's specific to the organization of a Department of Technology, actually, perhaps to the contrary, that we're not really growing per se. Last year, and we're continuing with this year, we're really looking for an efficiency, effective building perspective. So, started with a functional alignment and looking at, hey, where are some of the area of services perhaps needs to be streamlined a bit if we are, overlapping a bit. That's what we'll be focusing on. So in that area, I think the org chart is a good reflection where procurement is being handled together, digital innovation is being handled, as a single office, security continue to be a big focus of ours, workforce development, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not so going into the new year is not so much about growing the Department of Technology, but looking at what does the Department of Technology needs to do to be a support mechanism as well as an oversight organism, organization, I should say, for the rest of the state.
Well, that's a good segue into the STAR project approval lifecycle process. It's been in effect now, I guess, for going on 2 years, but I think this is the last 12 months of seeing it really gear up in an operation. How's that going? How I noticed that there's a new document which lists the various PAL IT project proposals, which I kind of think, because people have been looking, where are the feasibility study reports that we used to get? We don't get those anymore. Those have finally been retired, I think. Is that true, or are some agencies still sneaking around with doing FSRs? I wouldn't be surprised. How's it working out?
It's good. It's good. It definitely went through its growing pain, like just like any process implementation. And to us, it's normal process of continue to evolve. As you mentioned, the first 2 years, a lot of it is putting that concept into, operation and see how it's being worked out, and then receiving a lot of feedback. This past year, your observation is accurate that we have not only further operationalized it, we're continuing to looking streamline the process even more, because this is where you're looking at the list. I assume you're referring to, it's a list of a concept that are coming from the organization. Yeah. We're continuing to look for ways that perhaps the organization can take more ownership, like they should be, when it comes to putting priority on those business case. And the Department of Technology is working with them, looking at different alternatives and options in meeting those business case.
Okay.
As opposed to at the beginning, perhaps a lot of time is spent, purely looking at, is this a priority for the organization or is this not a priority for the organization? We're giving a lot of that empowerment back to the department and their corresponding agencies, so the business entity can make that decision on their own.
And so, but as I said before, the FSR has been replaced by this process, and this, is there an actual document? I mean, you used to be able to go in and get an FSR. If I wanted to see what's actually replacing the FSR, is there a name for it? Is it a specific report? Is it part of the PAL?
Yeah, so the project lifecycle, project approval lifecycle, aka PAL, has 4 stages.
Right.
So each of the stage does have a document that will become available once it's approved.
Okay.
And so that's, if you look at it, it's I'll call it a quote-unquote FSR into 4 succinct modules. Okay.
And interestingly, you're making about the FSR, as the PAL moves forward, those will be made available to the general public, I guess is what you're saying.
At each of the stage, that once it's approved.
Okay.
Right.
And that's the thing that I was curious about. We are familiar with the capital plan, the capital list of proposed or approved projects in your capital plan. How does that fit in with PAL?
So if you look at our website, there continue to be a list of approved project, as well as the status, if you will, for those reportable projects. Those continue to be available to the public. And in fact, recently we even added what is called I can't think of the word, not the stoplight, but the red, yellow, and green type of indicator on that. And so there's so that list continue to be available. And as additional concepts becomes a reality, to be executed a project, that portfolio will continue to be
but there's still going to be the capital plan and as proposed projects.
Yeah, and if you
this one?
So the capital plan, just to be accurate, the capital plan is really about spending for the department on their infrastructure, related. Where project, it's a business solution investment, right? So there's
I got you now. That makes sense. Okay. We talked about initiatives. We talked about the approval process, and you mentioned the streamlining it, because that was seemed to be always be the gripe that you might hear about STAR, that it might delay the process. So it's interesting and important that you're planning on streamlining it, because I think many people will be interested. I did notice in your budget, the one that was started in July, I think you've got email, going to enterprise email system, and also the Microsoft 360 rollout, I guess it is. Is that the okay? So we didn't talk about that a little bit. So you're gonna go to one email system for the state. Maybe it's already happened.
Yeah, that's actually something. It started before I joined the department. Lots of kudos to my predecessor, and Chris himself specifically was instrumental in getting the state to the direction where, when it comes to standardized service such as email, why each individual state entity continues to have their own contract when we could leverage a single state contract to achieve that efficiency. So yeah, that migration effort has really started. It's been 2 years, I think,
Yeah.
and counting, and
Okay.
should wrap that up pretty soon.
Okay. One of the areas and one of the most critical functions in your office is overseeing projects. Whether it's IPOC, independent project oversight, or other ways that you are helping, or at least ostensibly helping agencies manage their projects successfully and all that. And we've noticed now that as it affects, let's say, Fiscal, there was a report done by your office, ended up in the Sacramento Bee, about some of the struggles that they're having. I'm not so much concerned about that as I am about the process itself. So you're now doing these IPOCs. Do you do them internally? Do you have vendor partners that help you complete these things? Or just how does it work for IPOC through the CDT? And that is IPOC. I'm using the right term there, right?
Yes, it's I know you're if anybody using acronyms, right? We're always accused of too many acronyms, so I have a tendency to spell everything out. So the Independent Project Oversight, it's actually IPO.
Yeah.
The C used to stand for, something different. It's a combination of state staff, as well as this year we also started to bring in private sector experts to work with the state staff on those mega projects, and Fiscal being one of those that we believe, just giving the sheer size of the project, the complexity, and our state staff will be in a great shape if we can augment them with a good industry expert, so that they can work together to look for the things that need to be looked at and help the project to be successful while training our staff to continue to grow.
No, I think it's very valid. I did notice that I think it was one of the big consulting firms was just brought in $1 million plus contract to do some oversight for Fiscal, I think through your office. So that's all part of the same program, I assume, and I think it's a good idea. I think all of us agree. It's funny, we saw the big article about the University of California's payroll system, and I wrote jokingly, and I said, I'm sure since that you're not responsible, your office is not responsible for higher ed's IT projects, but just as a few years ago, the state CIO is not responsible for court IT projects, and the legislature has gone and changed that. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some legislative interest in giving you responsibility now over higher ed, particularly these $100 million and up projects. It seems they need they need a steady hand. Maybe that's going to be another assignment for you next year. Just what you needed, right? There has been some interest in California over the years, and it was in Massachusetts when I was there, for contingency type of contracting, where a company, rather than being paid on a time and materials basis or a fixed price, is reimbursed through the savings or the revenues that are created through the implementation of enabling technologies. A good example is at FTB. Kathy Cleek and company, and going back since when I was CIO, FTB was very involved in these type of contingency arrangements with vendors, where they would say, hey, if you can help us raise revenues or increase the collections that we're having a hard time we'll pay you out of those collections. And it was very successful at FTB, and I know that was the basis of the big project over at BOE that kind of fell sideways, and there's some organizational changes there. But it seems like such a rational way to do things, rather than risking the funds that sometimes that actually look at some of these projects where there can be enormous benefits for both concerned, the state and the vendor. You have any thoughts on those lines?
I can definitely share some of the experience that I've actually, as you know, that I used to be the Chief Technology Officer at DEN, Board of Equalization. Now it's the California Department of Tax and Fee.
Farted disappeared
another
like a
acronym,
in the wind,
another
right?
acronym for you to keep up with. And then the project that you're talking about is the Central Revenue System project. And that project chose the same model as Franchise Tax Board have chosen, which is called a benefits-based procurement. And that was an extensive research and conversation and learn from our partners. In that case, this is a few years back with FTB. And yes, for organizations such as FTB and California Department of Tax and Fee, what we call revenue-based organization, that particular model makes sense. I don't necessarily say that model can be blindly applied to every single other type of department, because it's really depending on their funding structure and so I would say always open to what works the best, but in many cases it's a case-by-case scenario assessment, but we never close our door on things that make sense.
The big one that we looked at when I was CIO and I never could close a deal on was Medi-Cal fraud. And it's coincidentally one of our sponsors, LexisNexis, and one of their partners, Pondere and Encore, they've actually awarded a contract with healthcare services to actually do a massive analytics of potential fraud in the Medi-Cal program. And as you know, it's like $120 billion a year now. Huge, huge program. As I like to say, that budget is larger than 40 state budgets altogether. I mean, geez, can you imagine that? But they're not doing it in that alternative. What did you call it? Benefits based. This is your standard one. But there was a consideration given to doing that, particularly when you're talking about those kinds of numbers. And I know when I was CIO, that's what we wanted to do, but we couldn't cross the goal line on it. But 20 years later, they finally awarded it. So we must have been going in the right direction. Security. Always like to talk about security, and I know it's just got to be a huge emphasis, not only for you, but take a survey of the NASCIO folks. Everybody has it, highest priority. And there's been a major change around here since our friend Peter Liebert, who's been on our show, the CISO for the state of California. As you know, a year and a half ago, I guess, the state auditor blasted the security apparatus of the state and said that something like 90% or more of departments were not in compliance with their own, the department, the CISO's security compliance requirements. Well, lo and behold, we came across this report just recently, and that number is completely turned around. Tell us about that. That's a good news story.
Absolutely. I think this is definitely one of those things that I came in last year right in the midst of security. It's a major topics on everybody's radar, and at the time, and this is prior to Peter joining, which is the end of the calendar year. There's a major push, thanks to the governor's office and all of our partner at the Office of Emergency Services, CHP, and the military department. Really, we call ourselves the core force, really have come together with the establishment of the California Cybersecurity Integration Center to just hone in on what do we need to do to step up the priority of cybersecurity. So, gosh, I can't even remember now how many conversations we had back and forth with amongst the four core partners and with the department, with everybody involved, to not only have a sustainable strategy in place, and also working with the legislature to making sure that not only reacting to situation that happen, but what do we need to do from a preemptive measure perspective. That's why you see AB 670, where the independent assessment is going on to each of the department. The Department of Technology is responsible for the audit, which Peter is instrumental in leading that right now. And while the Governor's Office executive order of the establishment of that cyber integrated center to have a proactive monitoring and incident management. So it's really the two-pronged approach from preventive to proactive management of situation, really raise the attention needed.
And obviously, are we comparing apples and oranges when we look at what the auditor found and what the latest compliance figures are, or is it really that big a 180-degree success story? How people would look at that number, I'll leave it to the auditors to see how they were comparing the number, but I just know that for those of us that are heavily involved,
we're very, very pleased with the momentum it has picked up and the partnership that we have gained through this.
Yeah, you should be. You won't get any front page stories of it, but it was, you got a good front page story out of Tech Leader TV, I'll tell you that. That was a major turnaround. It's a major success story compared to the fallout from that auditor's report. Jeez,
a lot of people putting a lot of hours in it.
Well, congratulations on that, for sure. Okay, I know when your first things you talked about was procurement reform. Everybody's got a procurement reform idea. What's going on in procurement now in the state of California, where for IT is considered? What's the latest update?
So we did start using the word procurement reform, but then a wise person told me that perhaps it's more about procurement modernization rather than procurement reform. And the reason for that is, as you all know, this procurement challenge, if you will, that we all been facing. A lot of it from the vendor community. We have a lot of interactions with to obtain feedback. Ourselves, when we were at the receiving end, needing to do procurement, and now that I'm at a control agency which needs to make sure the procurement rules are followed and the integrity is maintained, 360-degree, we know it's an area that needs to continue to improve. And because of that, we will be kidding ourselves if we think that we're literally doing things different tomorrow. Right. So therefore, I think modernizing it and have a good strategy of a 2 to 3 year plan, we think it's more palatable for everyone involved.
I can't remember now. Is Jim Butler have a permanent replacement, or is someone still acting over at DGS?
Someone is acting for him.
Who's that?
And Ricardo Martinez is the acting individual. And Jim has been instrumental, and so is Ricardo, along with Director Daniel Kim at Department of General Services, been very, very a good partner to Department of Technology in looking at this modernization strategy.
Well, getting a little specific on that, I know there was talk when Jim was leaving, or about that time, about the state adapting the NASPO, which is the the WISCA NASPO Procurement Alliance. What's going to happen? That's why it's confusing when you look at the state of California. You look at all the different schedules and the consideration that the state gives to adopting other procurement vehicles like NASPO or WISCA type of vendor, or from a local government is also on the table sometimes. What is the thinking there in your shop about how you want to proceed in that area? Because I know there's a little bit of tension there because of the administrative fees. In some sense, if you use CMAS, you send money to DGS. If you use CalNet, the money goes to CDT. That's got to be, but it's got to be contentious sometimes. How are you working that out?
Yeah, actually, that part of it, I haven't really experienced it myself. Our partnership with DGS has been very, very good. And I would say, rather than looking at whether it's WISCA or NASPO or some other acronym, CMAS and MSA, really the way we're coming at it is from an end user perspective. What is it, or what are the type of services that you need to acquire, in what time frame, in what frequency, and then therefore, let's go back to what are the procurement channels should be fitting. So in that, we really grouped it into 3 categories. Commodities, which definition of things that are like your PCs, your laptop, your printers, right? And then the second, what we call infrastructure and platform services. Anything that are behind the wall, but expected as a utility that you shouldn't have to worry about it, you just expect it to work. To the third category of business solution, which is consulting services, bringing in system integrators to help implement a solution. So once you group it into that 3 categories, we are in the process working actually with the vendor community to sift through what are all the existing channels available within the state as well as nationwide to fit those 3 categories.
Channels being procurement
channels,
yes.
vehicles.
Well,
yes.
That's a nice way to do it, and certainly using the idea that we want to do it according to what our customers' needs are. That's a little too logical for state government, Amy. I don't know. That's a good segue into one of my favorite topics, CalNet. We've had, in fact, I think Chris Cruz brought it up when he was here 6 months ago. He talked about the issue of CalNet 4 on the horizon. In fact, he even said if I'm not mistaken, that by next summer, you may see CalNet 4 on the streets. Can you update us on the status of?
Yeah, absolutely. CalNet 4 is one of those contract. I call it the contract, procurement channel or contract vehicle that we're looking at in the category of infrastructure and platform services. And CalNet 4, oh, excuse me, something's in my eyes. CalNet 4 is intended to be a refresh, but an enhancement of what the current CalNet 3 provides.
Okay.
So
what does that mean?
Meaning that one thing that I've heard, quite a bit, and not only from the vendor community, but also myself as a user, some of the services offered within the CalNet takes a long time to refresh. And vendors have to wait a while before they have a new service can be added, and it's not keeping up with the pace of technology become available. So that's the enhancement that we're talking about, that there is a work group in place looking at what type of service should be going to CalNet 4, number one. Number two,
internal work group, I assume, or is there vendors?
Right, internal, working with our IT community vendor. Again, we want to get the customer feedback first, as well as from a refresh perspective. What is a good frequency cadence, so that we can continue to use CalNet as a good channel to offer these latest technology. So that's all being actively worked on, and our goal is to have something coming up next year.
Oh, good. So that's still on schedule, perhaps even next summer.
I can tell you it's a top priority of ours.
Great. Well, that's good. You're talking to the father of CalNet, It started under me, with much pain and suffering to get it done. I'm glad to see it.
So now it's fourth generation.
20th year, I guess. Isn't that something? Okay, a couple other things. We've got just about 7 or 8 minutes left, and I wanted to talk about the cloud strategy, because as I said, it's confusing to a modest businessman like myself. But we started off with the Cal Cloud, which was at the time IBM's platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, and since then we've seen a number of different strategies come out of the Department of Technology, where you're having you now have software as a service. You have a number of you have storage as a service, which in a way is more like infrastructure. And I know you're getting the same complaints, because the people that were shut out by the original IBM Cal Cloud arrangement contract now are looking to try to get into that. So what's the latest? How are companies finding their way to get on the drawing board, so to speak, of being able to offer their services to states, to departments?
To departments, right. So we're trying to see if we have some snazzy term, other than calling, Cal Cloud 3.0. But the creative side is not necessarily in me right now. So we're just going to call it Cal Cloud 3.0. The strategy is from a infrastructure and a platform as a service perspective, which is what you alluded to, IBM, and they have been a great partner to the state also. What we're simply looking at, and I'm sure you're aware of this, recently we have added Microsoft and Amazon Web Services as additional cloud provider to now what it's called a hybrid cloud. So you get the combination of on-premise offering, as well as public cloud provided by private sectors. So that's on the infrastructure and platform side of things. What you alluded to as a software as a service, that is currently part of the offering, and we continue to onboard vendors who could provide SaaS based on the customer's needs.
These are ones like a CRM for
CRM,
Salesforce,
electronic signature, those are again is based on our IT community to say, hey, we need this, and we have enough interest to create this need, and therefore can you guys run an RFP and ask for vendors to participate. So that continued to be part of it, and again, it's hopefully is not confusing from the part of, is it Cal Cloud? Is it cloud? At the end of the day, it's a Cal Cloud 3.0 that offers services anywhere from infrastructure to platform to software as a way of a hosted service.
All right. I noticed the strategic plan. It's 2016, but I think is there an update coming, or is that on the drawing boards for this year? Or?
Yes, in fact we are. We're working on a 2020 vision plan.
That's a scoop, isn't it? That's what we're talking about with Tech Leader TV. Scoops, 2020 strategic plan coming out when?
2020, yes. We're looking at October, November timeframe.
All right.
And we have been actively engaging stakeholders from the state to get their input. Yeah,
Well,
stay tuned.
Good, it's good, very good. Vendor fair, not vendor fair, security fair. Coming up now with that's your alma mater. I hope there wasn't any favoritism letting them do this over there with your background. But seriously, it looks like a nice event. Want to tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes, we're very, very excited about it. And in fact, this year we chose to partner with CSUS, not because I'm a alumni there, but it is the focus. We want to do it as an education event. So partnering with an education entity such as California State University, it's a great venue for that.
Right.
And so they're working with the Core 4, which is OES and CHP military, of course, Department of Technology, to put this together with the continued partnership with the vendor community. And for those vendor community who provided sponsorship for us, thank you so much for that. And we've also extended the attendee invitation list to high school and community colleges, and also UC and CSU.
You're not going to charge them $2,500 to go, right?
No, this is a public education event.
That's what it costs to go. If I want to go to it, it's $2,500.
I think you might be pleasantly surprised. There are special offering for small business.
There's coupons, huh? Coupons?
No, it's way more than coupons.
No. Oh, good. That's good to hear.
Yes, there's a dedicated, if you call it, for the small business. Very, very excited. It's a one-day event, and then packed with just, my goodness, industry-leading speakers and good content, and a lot of research was also done by CSUS ahead of time on what are the things that, not only relevant, but thoughts-provoking for the attendees. So we're very excited.
I only got a minute or two left. I wanted to ask about, speaking of conferences, are you going to NASIO? Next month? Is it next October?
Oh, October, not this year.
No, not this year? I was wondering because I'm trying to make my plans whether to go or not. We're looking at, we almost lost you. Bryce Brown was telling us that you had some, the governor was perhaps going to pull you away for something. Have you had long conversations with the governor about technology? I know you won't want to share these private conversations, but what's his interest in technology? Can you tell us at least that broad outline?
Well, as you mentioned, these are private conversations, and I think in general, the governor's office has been a very, very good supporter and been very engaged into the direction of technology and cybersecurity, workforce development, digital innovation. So we're getting great support.
It's good. It's good to have an executive champion, isn't it? Well, Amy, thank you very much. This has been great. A great. I know. I look back at some of my notes when I was CIO, my memoirs, if you will. And I looked at the last year I was in office, and I remember going over to the governor's office and Governor Wilson saying, I want all you people, and it wasn't just me there, I want all you people to put a bow on everything you're doing. So it's a nice red bow, and just pass it along. So no bad news, no bad news. Anyway, Amy, thank you very much for being on the show. That's going to wrap it up for us today. Glad you could watch. Don't forget to be able to catch us on Channel 17. Check your local listings. We've got some great shows coming up this fall. We've actually got the data analytics expert from the Sacramento Kings has agreed to be on the show. We're also rolling out the Tech Leader TV newsletter next month. Everybody should do a newsletter. We're rolling one out ourselves, so look for that, and look for our drone event this fall. That's right, Tech Leader TV's drone event, November, over at the Sheridan in Sacramento. Check our website for more information. Thank you very much for watching. Good job. Good job.